here today. Dr. Maddie Holland is an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Studies, as well as Moody College Program Manager for Interdisciplinary Education Initiatives. She coordinates partnerships among departments within the college and also other academic units on campus at the undergraduate and graduate level. She's also the minority liaison for Moody College of Communication. Today she will be sharing her insights on using artificial intelligence tools such as ChatGPT to craft effective writing assignments that elicit authentic, student-centered learning products. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Holland.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for that formal introduction. So like Mary said, we are here today to talk about AI and creating assessments that are writing-based in the age of AI. And to kind of jump ahead to kind of one of my biggest takeaways from this is that we can rage as much as we would like to against the machine, but what is going to be much more productive for us is if we decide to rage with the machine instead. So that's going to be some of the guidance that I give you, and I'm going to explain to you what that means over the course of our time together. So we're going to start off with a plan for the day, just so you know what you're signed up for. So we're going to start with a very brief welcome to what in the heck we're talking about, introduce ourselves to those who are in the room with us today, and then we're just going to take a second so that I understand what your goals are, and for those of you who are watching this later, for you to get clear on what your goals are so that you can listen with directed attention. We'll do a quick overview of what a chatbot is. We're going to be focusing on ChatGPT because that's what everyone's focusing on. There are many others that exist out there, like Bard and whatever they're coming up with next. And then we're going to talk against the machine, some strategies for pushing back against the presence of ChatGPT and using it, and then we'll talk about some strategies for raging with the machine. So if you can't beat it, which we may not be able to, how can we make it work for us instead? So that's our quick plan for the day. My hope is to get you out of here well before 1:30 since we're compressing a little bit. So hello, welcome. As Mary said, my name is Maddie Holland. I'm an assistant professor of instruction in the Department of Communication Studies, but I really work across units in the college. So for the past couple of years, I've been teaching our foundations course where I introduce students to faculty and disciplines and centers from all 7 of our different majors that we have in the college. I also help coordinate a partnership between the Moody College and the Cockrell School of Engineering. And what I do in that role is actually writing flagged class. So I spend an awful lot of my time thinking about writing-based assignments, and because of the combination of those 2 classes, I typically enroll around 1,500 students a semester. So that means when there's a problem with something going on at scale that involves writing, I'm going to hear about it because I've got 1,500 students coming through, so they're going to start using ChatGPT, going to land with me pretty quickly. So I've already been encountering some students who have been caught using ChatGPT for not the purposes that we intended them to use it to, and I've also been engaged in some discussions with the Writing Flag Committee about, all right, what are we going to do as a university about the upcoming influence and kind of invasion of ChatGPT into our classroom? So that's why I'm here. It sounds like we have some people who are new to interfacing with chatbots in the room. I myself am still very new to interfacing with chatbots, so we are going to do a live demo of what it looks like together. So thank you for sharing that with me. So let's start with an overview of AI chatbots. Most often right now when you're hearing people talk about chatbots, what they're talking about is ChatGPT, and they're using those 2 phrases kind of interchangeably. There are many different variations of chatbots. So if you've ever needed to return something to Amazon and it was complicated, you've probably used a chatbot. If you have needed to change an airline reservation, you've probably used a chatbot. Sometimes when you find a weird mole on your body and you want to talk to your doctor, you're using a chatbot to get through to a doctor at first. But what we're interested in are things like ChatGPT, Bard, and other things that are coming out from major tech players that are helping to produce some sort of text, not necessarily guide you to speaking to a representative that can help you with your problem. So the first question that I find a lot of people encounter is, what can ChatGPT do? And normally I would solicit suggestions from you, but it sounds like we're kind of novice, so I'm gonna band the discussion a little bit. ChatGPT and these AI chatbots that we're talking about can produce human-like writing, and it's fairly striking how conversational that writing can be. So it completes tasks like making an outline. It can write a fiction or a nonfiction story. It can create a persuasive argument or a pitch. It can create a social media campaign. It can create a social media campaign just for Twitter, just for Instagram, just for Snapchat. It can generate lovely creative works like songs and poems. So there are some artists out there who are feeding tracks and lyrics of their own into ChatGPT and creating their own songs, which they are selling. A friend of mine wrote me a lovely poem about my dogs recently using ChatGPT. It was a little weird, but that's fine. And it can respond to fact-based queries. So it does this by you asking it a question. The more specific you are with your question, the better. And then it uses a vast corpus of knowledge to respond to that question. And the tricky thing about it is that the more people use it, the more people put text or knowledge or sources into it, the smarter it gets. So it's ever evolving. So just between the time when Mary and her co-pilot Shelley asked me to create this lecture and when I went to really finalize it yesterday, oops, sorry, telling you that I was doing this the night before, ChatGPT learned a lot of things, and I had to revise my guidance on what I could tell us to do in the face of ChatGPT. So what I want us to do is look at some things together that ChatGPT can do. So if you'll bear with me for a moment while I switch screens. Okay. Leave. Oh, okay. We are going to open up ChatGPT itself. All right. So on screen, we are here. We are inside the belly of the beast. This is ChatGPT. One thing you may want to warn your students about if they're like, oh yeah, ChatGPT, fun free software, got to sign up. You are linked to it. You are linked to it with an email account, and it does collect information about you. So if you don't like that type of thing, ChatGPT is not for you. But if you're into it, let's go ahead and let's ask it a question. So a question that you might ask it or that you might ask your students, and that your students might pop in here is, let's generate a social media campaign to reduce water use. And that's going to think for a second. Campaign name, drop by drop. Let's save water together. Create a hashtag, drop by drop save water. Develop eye-catching visuals that convey the importance of conserving. Share facts and statistics. Encourage people to take simple steps. Launch a social media challenge where people share their own water-saving tips. Partner with local organizations. Organize community events. This is really going through a lot of different steps, right? I'm going to ask it to stop generating. Let's say that you're focused on Instagram. Generate an Instagram post about saving water. And it's going to think, it is thinking. Caption, water is life. Let's save it drop by drop. Emojis, hashtags. Visual or alt text. In the caption, you can write about how important it is to save water and how small changes, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty smart. Let's say that you want it to do something a little bit more basic, like respond to a fact-based query. So something that gets taught in a lot of our foundational classes is the SMCR model of communication, right? Source, message, channel, receiver. SMCR, that's a little bit jargony. Maybe the bot doesn't know this. Define the SMCR model of communication. Think, think, think. Okay, it's a theoretical framework that explains the process of communication. And then without even me telling it to, it's going to start breaking this down into the 4 bullet points that I would be looking for in a student's definition of the SMCR model. Oh, it's going to explain assumptions that are in it too. That's pretty good, right? So the bot is pretty smart and it knows some advanced text. So sometimes some things that people will say are, we'll tell it to reference something specific that you talk about in class. If you do that, the bot is smart enough that it's started to infer what common course concepts are in various communication disciplines because of the number of users who are in these classes and are starting to input text corpus, the words that are coming from our classes. So ways that we could previously stump the bot that I would have suggested to you, like tell me from these course concepts, they're getting harder to do. It's not to say it can't be done. So now let's pop back to this for a second. Let's ask ourselves, okay, so that's what it can do. It feels pretty powerful. What can it not do? And there are some important things that ChatGPT and other AI bots cannot do. So ChatGPT cannot have a personal experience. It cannot own a rescue dog. It can't have been dumped last week. It doesn't have emotions. It is not sad. It is not happy. It does not have dreams, so it does not have a future career that it would like to have after graduation. It doesn't have connective, imaginative, or most importantly, self-reflective thoughts. So it can't tell you what the process of it coming up with this answer was like for it, using feeling words like frustrating, enlightening, innovating, not really a feeling word. To a certain degree, like we just talked about, it doesn't know what you said in class or what your class discussion referenced. So if you have a class that involves discussion and someone made this point and you really got into the weeds about it and you wanted to ask your students, okay, recap that discussion for me. The bot wasn't there and it wasn't listening to the best of my knowledge unless you've got an Alexa in the classroom. So it doesn't know what you said. If you did an activity and that activity was something that was on paper or something that is not well known, like a think, pair, share, like a brainstorm, like an evaluate and apply type of thing, it doesn't know what happened in that. It's not sitting next to you and watching. And then the other important thing that it can't do is it can't access some accredited sources. So if there are journal articles that you have or news articles that are paywalled, it can't get at those. It doesn't have access to those. And then very importantly for our SLH folks in the room, it does not have access to clinical data. So anything that's HIPAA protected, any sort of clinical observations that you do, it doesn't have access to that. For those of you who are journalism people, it doesn't have access to an interview that you had with someone. So it doesn't have access to those tapes. So there are specific source articles or source things that you can gather that it doesn't have access to. You can also ask it some questions that it can't respond to. And it does come with warnings for your students about like, hey, I'm not really designed to do this. So it will tell you that it is occasionally producing offensive or biased information. So it may, because it just feeds off of the information that's out there on the internet, generate stuff that is offensive based on that as an input. And then it also will tell you, as an AI language model, I don't have emotions or consciousness, so I can't reflect on things in the same way as humans do. But I can fake it, is basically what this says, and it will fake it for you. So if you say, tell me a story about a time when you personally, it will say, no, I don't have personal experiences, but if I was to have one, and then it will write one for you, and it's fairly convincing, it's fairly detailed. But let's look at some things that it doesn't respond to terribly well. And this was yesterday when it didn't respond to these very well, but we'll see if it can do it today. So here's a question that I came up with to stump our bot, which is, tell me about a time when you were deeply moved, when you had an emotional reaction to an ad campaign. What aspect of the SMCR model made it so moving to you? And it's going to think. So here it's going to tell me I don't have emotions. But let me share a general example with you. One ad campaign was the Share a Coke campaign, the ad personalizing Coke bottles. And if I was to start reading this, I'd be like, okay, tell me a little bit more about how this was moving to you, though. Like, what did you experience that was emotive? So the example is not quite there for me, and a student who turned this into me, I would say, we didn't quite meet the prompt in this, and I would send them back to it, right? So that's one way in which it falls short, and a student can personalize that, but a student is going to still have to do the work of thinking about what emotions did this ad campaign evoke. We can also say something like, we can get real vague. Generate a social media post designed to address one of the issues we identified as important in class discussion. So it can know that there are very many social media ad campaigns out there, but which ones did we say were important when we talked, right? And it's going to say something like climate change. And that might be one that you identified as important. But maybe something you're going to start doing is just verbally marking things as important so that the machine can guess, but the machine's not always going to be right. So you might be able to catch students in this way. But again, it's getting smarter and smarter every day. So let's now talk a little bit about what we should do in response to this really fascinating piece of technology that gets, again, smarter and smarter every day. And I can only hope that will happen for me. It does not, though. The first thing we can do is rage against the machine. So first of all, we can be like, oh, God, the youths, they don't value writing, critical thinking, originality anymore. And you can totally do that. You should do that. It's frustrating, right? But something else that we can do to kind of work against the influence of ChatGPT to help students do work that is maybe not their own in a faster way is work with your students. So share with them about the value of the writing process. So when I talk to students about my classes, I explain it to them. It's a very simple function machine. Exactly what you put in is exactly what you're going to get out. So if you put no effort into this class, no effort into the class that I have designed for you, you will get no learning out of it. It will not, in fact, prepare you for your career. You will not find it valuable. You will not find it insightful. You won't grow. And sometimes I'll even turn to an economic argument. You put $0 worth of effort into this, getting $0 out of this extremely expensive education that either you, your parents, or someone who you care about is paying a lot for. So make an argument. Writing is valuable. It pushes your brain to do something that you are going to need to do later on. And make the argument clear. Don't expect your students to get there on their own. They might not. And then also explain the why of any writing, or really any assignment or activity that you give to a student. Tell them, how does this connect to what you are going to be doing later in life? And you may need to ask your students. So if you teach an intro class or a class that is required, like a student is like, I actually don't want to be here. Say, okay, what do you want to do outside of this classroom? Where do you want to be at the end of this journey that we're having, right? And then you're going to ask them to articulate a connection between what is this activity designed to do and what am I going to do later in life and how do I draw value from it? How does offloading that value to a machine actually hurt me, right? So you can ask them, even if it doesn't relate to your job, how does this help you in your personal life? How does this help you in the spirit org that you're in right now? How does it help you with a different class that you're working on? So you can have a why. You can be like, this is why I think it's valuable, but it's also powerful for students to articulate their own why. And again, this is all drawing students away from working with ChatGPT, saying, don't do it, please don't do it. What do we know about when we say, don't touch it? Don't touch that button. Don't look at the candy. Don't think about the white elephant. Now I have to touch it, right? I have to have the candy. I need to think about the white elephant. So if you stand up there and you're like, oh man, we got to talk about ChatGPT, don't do it. Here's why it's bad. But you're just going to drive your students to be like, now I got to know what's got Professor Holland all hot and bothered, right? So when they end up there, how can you instead be like, okay, fine, it's out there and you have access to it and you very well might use it. Let's think about raging with the machine rather than against it, okay? So if you want to rage with the machine, there are a couple of things that you can do. You can start by looking at some of the prompts that you're asking students to engage in with written-based assignments. So one is, ask your students to connect course concepts to their own personal experiences. And like we just looked at, ChatGPT can get you 15% of the way there. But students are still going to have to fill in their own details. And so you're at least getting a little bit of that engagement that your original prompt was designed to get at, okay? You can also, like we said, again, ask your students to make specific reference to things that you did or discussed in class. So this might mean altering a little bit of some of your lesson plans or what you do in class each day to make things a little bit more specific to each class that you're doing, taking some stuff offline. Again, ChatGPT can make a very educated guess, and maybe 3 to 6 times out of 10, it's going to hit it right on the nose. But a student's still going to have to refine it. Still go back and look at what did the bot create for me and how do I make it actually reflective of what we did in class. Now, if you want to ask a very fact-based question, like your learning outcome is just to get students to retain and give information back to you correctly, which is completely fine. It's part of Bloom's taxonomy, right? You may want to add a section to writing-based assignments. So say you're going to say something like, explain the SMCR model of communication to me, and then apply it to a social media campaign. ChatGPT can do that whole thing, and it can do it extremely well. Like I looked at the response that it would give to me, and I was like, that's an A response right there. It's written quite well for a student. Add a section to that assignment or any other assignment. Say, okay, what was the process of writing this response like? What stages did you go through? How did you look this up? Did you go back to your notes? Did you write a draft and then reread it? Did you take it to the Moody Writing Support Center? Did you have a friend read it? Did you make an outline? Have you made an outline before? Ask students to describe those steps to you. Or just ask questions like, what was the hardest part of this? Hardest part was remembering what you told me the SMCR model was. What was the easiest part? What's the takeaway? What do you think the why is? Ask students to reflect on the process of writing, because they can't do that if they didn't actually do the process of writing. And then finally, use the machine for good. So you can just straight up be like, all right, here is your take-home test. I want you to put these answers into ChatGPT and bring the answers back to me, okay? Then what I want you to do is reflect on the answer that the bot gave you. What would you change? What do you like? What would you need to revise? What would you add, subtract, take away? Act as a peer reviewer. How does this square up with what you would have said? Instead, how do we make it better? Is there misinformation in there? So you can challenge your students to be smarter than the bot, if you want them to, okay? You can also ask them, if you are rubric-oriented, to take the rubric that you would use to grade their work, say now you use the rubric to grade that work, and you're still getting students to do some of that cognitive work that your writing-based assignments were designed to do in the first place. So we'll pause here with people in the room. What questions do you have? Yeah, Kate?
Research papers, does it use references?
It can reference, but if you have like only use articles from my syllabus, it may not have your syllabus yet. So you can kind of bind or bound what it can make reference to, and so it may not be able to hit those criteria. But I do believe you can tell it and cite in MLA, APA, Chicago.
And the references are not accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can we check if the information is trustful or not?
Is stressful?
Trustful.
Oh, is trustworthy? It will draw from a source. So whether the source is academic and peer-reviewed versus is just a news article coming from like Slate or The Onion, no, it may not. It doesn't know. You can't direct it to say, and use only peer-reviewed research articles.
Mm-hmm.
It won't respond well to that.
Yeah, but my question is, the answer that ChatGPT is giving to you, for example, in a prompt,
Mm-hmm.
how to evaluate if it's something real or if it's something made by?
Yeah,
And
so.
it's not, that doesn't have credibility, it's like based on fake news, because it's difficult to understand what is in the background.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, what I'm hearing is, how do we tell whether what I'm getting is a student's real writing or whether it's been produced by a bot? Is that what you're asking?
No, not
Okay.
really. Like, I'm thinking about use the machine for good.
Okay.
But how can are we assuming that everything that ChatGPT is giving me as answer is something trustful or not?
Mm-hmm.
So, cause I'm just saying that because I just like checking with other people that are dealing with this. I just got, for example, another PhD student saying that he was asking for references for
Okay.
something, an article that he wants to write. And then he got an article that really suits what he wanted to write, but then he looked for the article and the article doesn't exist.
Interesting. Okay.
So this kind of things that there are some of those examples that ChatGPT, not all the information that they're giving to you is really real information.
Yeah.
Some of them are made up.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And it's going to warn you at the beginning, hey, sometimes you're going to get inaccurate, offensive, or biased information that's going to come out of this bot, right? But unless you are going to go through and check every single reference in every student's paper and say, is this real? Is it a valid source? Then it's playing on, well, it's not designed to be used to cheat, but there's an efficiency there where it's unlikely that you're going to go through every single reference to make sure that it exists. Yeah. What other questions? Okay. So one thing that I would encourage you to do is to start doing kind of a kick the tires on your own course. Some of you are TAs, so this may not be your job. It might be something that you do just to let the faculty member that you collaborate with know. But go on into ChatGPT. It's free to sign up, but you do have to give it your personal information. I'm going to input a writing prompt from your course or something that's related to your objectives What's a key term you would ask students to define, or maybe put in a multiple choice question or something like that. Change it around so that you're asking a question of the bot and see what the machine produces. And you might be extremely surprised by what the machine can produce in response to these questions that you've designed. And then sit there and tinker and struggle. How can you change the question around, or how can you add something to the question, or how do you build in a class activity to stump or revise what it gives you, right? And then see if you can try that in the next iteration of your course. If looking at what ChatGPT can do today and hearing about how it's learning and getting smarter feels scary and overwhelming, that's okay. It is a frightening and overwhelming development. But what I want to cover in our next slide are some kind of do's and don'ts for how to start responding to this. So there is going to be upcoming guidance from the Writing Flag, and there is already guidance from the Center for Teaching and Learning on like, well, okay, we're experiencing kind of a tectonic shift. What should we as instructors do? So the first thing to do is don't overreact. Don't feel like you got to burn your entire course to the ground, redo everything all at once because everything is over, right? We can approach this piecemeal. And then the other thing that we don't want you to do is don't overreact to the work products that you receive from your students. So ChatGPT does produce pretty basic formulaic writing that sometimes has errors in it, or it feels stunted in speech. It chooses the wrong word, right? It's a natural language processing model, but it's not entirely natural in what it produces. Sometimes this is extremely similar to what our novice writers produce. Developmentally, that is appropriate for students who are at the beginning of learning to become advanced writers. So saying to every student who turns something into you that has kind of clunky sentence structure or is very basic, very rigid, saying to them, I think you cheated on this, it's not what we want you to do, right? We also don't want you to turn to things like Turnitin or other plagiarism detection software, because those have their own sets of flaws within them. So don't like go nuts trying to catch every single instance of ChatGPT, either influenced or totally written work. We're just not there yet. We don't have the capability to do that. But don't wait, okay? So don't wait to say, I'm gonna ChatGPT proof my entire course a week before the semester starts. I would encourage you to start thinking slowly now about 1 or 2 things that you can change in your course over the course of time. So when we think about doing this to create more inclusive and accessible classes, we talk about this as a +1 mindset. What's one more thing that I can do to my course this semester or this week to make it more accessible and inclusive? And just take on that one small thing, one thing at a time. And eventually, you will get there. With ChatGPT, this is particularly important because the one step that you take now to kind of thwart the bot, it's not going to be super effective next year. So you're going to have to be continuously +1ing your course. So just keep making the small tweaks and be proud of yourself for making the small tweaks. And then finally, don't be complacent. So something that we have a tendency to do is to throw our hands up when things feel overwhelming or unsolvable or like there's no clear endpoint, and just be like, nope, never mind. Drop the writing flag from my course and everyone is going to produce either oral or visual reports for everything from now on. You don't have to do that, and some of us really need that writing flag for a variety of reasons. So come see wonderful folks at Kate. You can see Mary, you can see Shelley, you can see Sylvia. You can talk to the Moody Writing Support Program. So we have an entire program just devoted to writing, and it's geared towards our students, but it can also be there for you to think about what effective writing prompts can be. And then we do have some guidance out already from the Center for Teaching and Learning, and other bodies outside of the university have issued guidance. And I think the most powerful piece of guidance that I have read is that we should not sit here and wait for UT to tell us what to do. Because UT can issue kind of a general proclamation, but you're the expert in your course and your students. And so you will know best how to work with and against the machine in appropriate ways for your learning objectives, your students, and your teaching style. So go ahead and engage and make rules for yourself now. Don't wait and wait and wait for someone else to tell you what to do. So from that, I really ripped through that. I know most of you were here for just, goals for today, general learning, getting some tips and tricks. Maybe one thought, new piece of learning from everyone in the room. And then for those of you who are watching this later, I would encourage you to do this debrief exercise with yourself. If you watched this on double speed, what did you get out of the 15 minutes you heard of me talking really fast? But we'll go in the opposite direction this time. Kate, what is just one thing that occurred in your brain in our time together?
I'm a little bit amazed because I haven't done much playing around with it.
Yeah, it is. It is staggering. It's staggering.
And it's interesting to think about too, taking notes and thinking about how to prep for, but not teaching until August. I can only imagine the different capabilities.
Yes, and I lost at least 45 minutes trying to stump the machine yesterday. So in August, we'll see what we see.
Very eye-opening and enlightening, and I think we all know this is the way the world is going. So not to try and fight it, but just learning and thinking about best strategies in terms of utilizing it. So yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Mary.
I like the idea of having students use a rubric to evaluate ChatGPT output.
Thank you. Yes, I also like making students use the rubric that I work very hard on. Sylvia?
I like the idea of you as a faculty trying to send the prompt to the ChatGPT and see the answer. So it's kind of reverse engineering, that you're trying to see what comes out, and then you can evaluate if you can change something in the prompt. So I think this is really effective.
Yeah, definitely. Test your product.
It's helpful to get the overview of what ChatGPT currently can't do. And a question I just had, thinking about it, have you I haven't messed around with this myself, but if you were to put in the examples we looked at about the water usage campaign, will it spit out the same thing? I don't know how often it's updating, or even if you would try it multiple times, because I'm wondering, would we see identical submission?
That's interesting.
Would that be a good giveaway, or does it constantly kind of alter the wording, or I don't know?
So in my experience, I asked it the question multiple times. It will start altering the wording. I wonder, though, if you have a class of however many students, because it is connected to and draws from its memory on chatting with you specifically, if its first iteration is the same for everyone. So you might very well see a repeated campaign or something that is shockingly similar. So being on the lookout for that in classes is something that I think is really smart. That's a great detection tool. What happened in your brain today?
Actually, I like your idea. You mentioned ask a student to write with their own experience.
Yeah.
That cannot be copied or made up.
Yeah,
I like
exactly.
Yeah. But then I thought about more and say, oh gosh, probably in the future we're gonna reduce long essay assignments.
Yep.
If you ask, say, prepare a lot of time, write something on some particular academic topic, you cannot force them not to use that. They're gonna try to refer to them.
Yeah. So.
I think I need to think about my course in the future. What can we do?
Yeah, thinking about tasks outside of just our traditional or the ways that we know right now to get students to engage in what we're trying to get them to do with traditional academic writing.
Yeah.
What else can we ask them for?
You cannot just ask some question about science. What kind of special topic? It's not related with anybody's personal experience, right? It's science.
Yeah.
You're gonna probably refer to ChatGPT. I guess probably I'm thinking, I won't do this in the future.
Yeah.
I can ask something like you said. Okay, write something about your personal experience related with this topic. How do you apply this concept? That may be personalized. Must be personalized. Yeah.
And Dr. Carroll, we're going to come to you in just a second, but I'm going to rant for a second before we do that. Something I was thinking about with this is I know something that was really disruptive for me as an undergraduate was when we made the transition in my classes from me responding to prompts that professors gave me to professors saying, write a paper. And I would say, about what? And they said, you choose the topic. So what chat can't do, GPT can't do, is respond to a prompt that doesn't exist. So when it's you come up with your own question and answer it, that's an interesting turn to make. And another thing that you can do in response to this is say, okay, here's the output that ChatGPT gave you. What questions does it leave open? What else would you like for us to talk about in class? What questions or thoughts do you have based on this? And I think that that's an interesting way to critique what's in there and again get the student to engage. Blinding insights from my colleague, Dr. Carroll.
It's always wild to me. I've been working with a consulting client, and he's been trying to write some sales material, and he would walk me through this and be like, I would have it create a prompt to sell this idea, and then I'd say, write it in this tone. write it at this education level, write it with this approach or these outcomes and insights, and you'd see it shifted. And so I don't know if students know to that nuance level just yet. I don't know if they do, but that's terrifying. But two, I'm all about using this to decrease the load on some of the heavier work that students perceive. Like, for example, if I want to walk them through career stuff and say, I want you to update your resume, ChatGPT could create a multitude of resume bullet points that we could then evaluate and have them choose the best one and edit. So I'm like, take the load off. Because half the reason they don't do it is because they don't know how. So if it gives them guidelines, all for it.
Yeah, and I think providing students with a productive way, a structured way to use this technology will decrease the draw for them to use it in ways that we don't want them to be using it. So again, the more we say don't think about it, don't touch it, don't use it, don't like it, it's going to start to create a push force rather than a force away from it. So I would encourage you to think about, are there ways that I can show that I'm not just a regular faculty member? I'm a cool faculty member, right? Love it, you guys keep me young. Bring that into your classroom and show that you're aware of it too, because if the students know that you're aware of it, they're less likely to think they can sneak it past you. Well, thank you all for joining me this afternoon. I know many of you have classes to get off to, but I appreciate your time.